Our speaker this morning, Betsy, Lyles, Swetenburg, first visited Dudley and spoke in the Dudley Chapel in the summer of 2015. A 2011 graduate of Davidson College in North Carolina, she was a classmate of the late Dudley leader John Frankel. After graduating from Davidson, she moved to Decatur, Georgia to attend Columbia Theological Seminary. It is there where her Dudley network grew when she met Caleb and Jonah Florence and their parents, Anna and David. In fact, she even considers herself the big sister that they never wanted. After earning her Master of Divinity degree, she served as the Director of Admissions and Financial Aid at Columbia. And next month, she'll begin a new job as the Associate Pastor for Emerging Ministries at Trinity Presbyterian Church in Atlanta. And along with a new job, Betsy is recently married to Owen Swetenburg, and the two call Atlanta their new home. Said former Dudley trustee and chapel speaker Anna Carter Florence, when Betsy moved to Columbia, it was clear that this was a young woman who was born to be a world leader. She is a wise and trusted colleague, and we are thrilled that she is a member of the Dudley community. When she's not working, Betsy enjoys live music, hiking, running, and traveling. She also has a long bucket list. Near the top of that list is climbing the 19,000-foot Mount Kilimanjaro in Tanzania, Africa. And knowing her just the little bit that I do, I would not bet against her. Please join me this morning in a warm Dudley welcome for camper number 23845, Reverend Betsy Lyles Swetenburg.
Thank you, Matt, and thank you, Fu, for the invitation. It is always such a joy and a privilege to get any time at this camp and to get to know more of you. So I'm very glad to be back here this morning. I'm just curious, how many of you know that story? Anyone? A couple? It's pretty weird, right? We don't hear the names in what was said today, but this is the story of Adam and Eve. A man and a woman, naked in a garden, a talking snake, and then a quick attempt to make clothes out of leaves. There is a lot going on in the short excerpt we heard today. And as weird as I think it might be to see a talking snake in the middle of a garden, I think that clothes made out of fig leaves are even more alarming. It just seems like such a dumb idea to me. Now, some people might call it resourceful, using what you have available. But how many of you have ever seen a fig tree? Anyone? Have you ever touched the leaves? Has anyone ever tried to sew the leaves? Okay, I didn't think so. My parents have some fig trees in their backyard. And a few years ago, I was reading this story and thinking about what in the world clothing made out of fig tree leaves would look like. So I picked a pile of leaves off the tree. I got a needle and some thread, and I began sewing. This was not one of my greatest ideas. And I quickly learned that I am not a great sewer either. I pieced together the leaves in a pattern that I thought could be a piece of clothing, and then I tried to sew. I wound up with my fingers that had been pricked by needles all over the place, and the piece of clothing, if you could call it that, definitely was not functional. My skin itched from touching the leaves. Those who said you'd touch the leaves might know sometimes those leaves are just a little bit itchy on your skin, and they wilted pretty quickly. The project was a total failure. It was frustrating and it was time-consuming, and it affirmed everything that I thought when I first read this story. Trying to make clothes out of fig leaves is a dumb idea. I think that Adam and Eve must have been desperate. There is really no other explanation for what they did. Think about it. God gives them a beautiful home in the middle of a garden. Everything is green, there are tons of fruit trees around, And then God tells them that they should make themselves at home. Choice time, forever. Eat whatever you want, sit and sleep and play wherever you want. There's delicious food, probably not as delicious as the food you get from Dudley, but it was good enough. The only rule is that you can't eat the fruit off this one tree. Easy enough, right? But then there's a sneaky snake that makes Eve second guess if God really meant what he said. Did God say you couldn't eat any of the fruit? Says the snake. No, says Eve. God said that we can eat any of the fruit from the trees except that one tree right there. And if we eat the fruit off that tree, then we'll die. That seems pretty extreme to me. I don't know about you. But that snake doesn't give up. Oh, come on, you won't die. You'll just know more. Like the difference between good and evil. Huh, thinks Eve. That doesn't sound so bad. And we know how the story ends. She grabs a piece of fruit from the one tree that they weren't supposed to touch, and she and Adam each have a bite. And suddenly, they realize that they're naked in a garden, and then they do the dumb thing. They sew fig leaves together to try and cover themselves up. I think they were desperate. I think they were so ashamed of doing the one thing that they were told not to do that they were trying to hide. So they just reached for the first thing that they could find and started making some clothes, hoping that God wouldn't notice anything. But let's be honest, whether you're God or not, you'll notice if someone is wearing fig leaves, I hope. It's not exactly a discreet outfit. So right after they sew fig leaves, Adam and Eve hear God going on his evening stroll to enjoy the breeze, probably a lot like this one. So they hide really quickly. But God calls out, "Where are you?" Did you know they play hide and seek in the Bible? I think this is the first game they ever played. And Adam screams back, "I heard you and I was afraid since I was naked, so I'm hiding." He's hiding because he's ashamed. He feels guilty and he feels sad for breaking the rules, and he doesn't know what to do to make it right. I know this story all too well, and I bet some of you do too. Sewing fig leaves together isn't exactly my first response to a situation, but I have done other things just as dumb to hide my shame. I can remember when I started college. I had been a straight A student for my whole life, and I'd always had to work pretty hard in school, but it always paid off. I remember taking a math class my first year and working so hard on my assignments, but I just didn't get it. I kept studying, I would go to the library, I would do extra practice problems, but it didn't matter. I got an F on my first test, even though I had put in so much time. And I remember that moment sitting in my class, getting my test back, and I felt like the wind had been knocked out of me. It started getting harder to breathe, my eyes welled up with tears, and I wanted to get out of that classroom as fast as possible. I went back to my dorm, and I cried. I was embarrassed, I was ashamed. I didn't want to go back to that class again because I didn't want to have to see the teacher. I felt like I'd let him down. And my parents knew I'd been studying for this test extra hard, and they called to ask how it went. I lied. Oh, it was great. I did way better than I thought I was going to. And then I started telling myself that I deserved that F. I would pull out my books to study for math, and in my head, I would hear a little voice saying, "What's the point? You're not smart enough to pass this class. Go ahead and give up." I didn't literally sew fig leaves together, but my response was just as irrational. Of course, one test can't prove whether or not someone is smart or is going to succeed in a class. I can see that now, but when we're ashamed, we act in ways that don't make sense. We do the first thing that comes to mind so that we can hide ourselves, so that we don't have to talk about whatever it is that is making us anxious and embarrassed. I read a story about a man named Kevin who had a rough childhood. His parents didn't get along, there was a lot of fighting in his home, and he decided as a child that there must be something wrong with him. Maybe he was the reason that his parents were so unhappy and that his childhood was really unhappy. He didn't literally sew fig leaves together either, but he spent his childhood trying to cover up his feelings of being unworthy by being the perfect student. He thought that if he stood out at school and if he was the perfect student, the first one to answer questions, the first one to turn in assignments, then no one would ask questions about his family life. And he might forget that deep down, he felt like he was part of the problem. He so desperately wanted to be the perfect student that he said that one time he had to write a poem for class. And so he went to the library and got a book of poetry. And he found a poem that he thought was way better than anything he could write on his own. And he copied it. And so he wrote that poem word for word in his notebook. And he was so scared that someone might find out that he didn't actually write that poem, he tore the page out of the book from the library that had that poem on it, because he thought someone might find that poem and learn that he actually didn't write it. I think that there's a reason that this is the third story in the Bible. You know the first two stories because we read them in the responsive reading this morning. God creates the earth, and then God creates us, and then this. God leaves us home alone, and this is what happens. Adam and Eve break the rules, and then they feel ashamed. And I hate to break it to you, but we will all experience moments like Adam and Eve. And because we're human, we'll try to hide from our shame, just like they did. There's a website called Post Secret that I look at from time to time. Has anyone heard of this? Yeah, a couple. The website is just pictures of postcards that people have sent in. The whole idea is that anyone can send in a postcard with one of their secrets on it, but you can't write your name. They think that if everything's anonymous, people might feel comfortable sharing some of their deepest, darkest secrets. And it can be anything. There are secrets all over the place. One from a waiter who said that if a customer is rude, he spits in their food. Another from someone who works at an ice cream shop who says if parents are mean to him in the line, then he gives the children an extra scoop of ice cream. You might want to find that ice cream shop. Or one that says, I sell fake autographs on eBay, and I make a lot of money. And then there are harder secrets. Like, I tell everyone I'm an artist because I'm too embarrassed to admit what I really do for a living. Or, I smile all the time because I don't want anyone to know how lonely I am. Or, I haven't had a friend since high school. Now I'm 31 years old. Or this one. Since I became a second lieutenant in the Army, I have willingly leaked military secrets to make operations fail. I'm scared of what will happen to me if anyone finds out. And there are hundreds and hundreds more. There are books of these postcards. And I know that if someone handed me a stack of postcards, I'd have more than enough secrets to write on them. All these things that I have kept quiet and not shared with a soul because I'm too scared of what people might think if they knew. But here's what I want you to know. You can't be human and not have those things. You may not be holding on to anything right now, but one day you will be. We all do. And we will all feel ashamed of the things that we keep to ourselves. But this is why the story of Adam and Eve is so important. Since the beginning, it's been this way. And since the beginning, we have tried to cover up ourselves and our stories. Later in the story, Adam and Eve both talk to God and try to explain themselves. Adam says, "She made me do it." And Eve says, "The snake made me do it." I wish that they had talked to each other, though, because maybe if they did, they would have realized that they were both feeling ashamed, and maybe they would have realized that they weren't alone. It's the same reason that I wish those postcards weren't anonymous. I wish that I could write to the people sending in their deepest, darkest secrets and say, "Me too. You aren't alone." So my challenge to each of you is to try to talk to someone when you feel like you're holding something in. Sewing fig leaves really isn't the best way to deal with things when you're feeling ashamed. Talk to your friends, talk to your leaders, and when you go home, talk to your parents. Because I bet the chances are pretty high that they know what it's like to be ashamed of something too. And when someone comes to you to tell you what they're ashamed of, my challenge is for you to respond by saying, "Me too. You aren't alone." And if you haven't been listening, listen to this, because if there is anything that I want you to hear, it's this. Adam and Eve didn't have to tell God what they had done. God already knew. God already knows the things that we try so incredibly hard to cover up, even with things as dumb as fig leaves. And God loves us anyways. There is nothing, no secret, no mistake, no lie, no thing that could make you unlovable in God's eyes. And I think that is the best news. Amen.